kind of business owners and business founders, it's very tempting, isn't it, when you're struggling and you're facing problems, to think, this has never happened to anybody before, this is awful, it's so lonely, I'm so isolated, nobody understands. And actually, when you start to unpick it and you start to talk to other people, of course all these issues are shared, and we all face the same things, not all the time, but there's a lot of commonality in it. So the first point about growth is that everything I say you already know, because nothing's new. The second thing to say is we are a charity. I founded the charity 8 years ago, but we run, what that means is that we're not allowed to distribute profit. It doesn't mean that we don't have to make a profit. We do, otherwise we can't, or a small surplus at least, otherwise we can't continue to invest and to operate. And the similarity, we're more like a business organization than a charity in lots of ways. We derive our income from contracts with government departments, schools, police, health, which are just standard contracts for the delivery of services that happen to be around young people. We generate income from sales, because the food operation, we do charge the organisations that take the surplus food from us. And even the portion of our income, it's about a third of our income, that comes from grants, I liken more to contracts in any case, because they never come with no strings. They're always for the delivery of something that's important to that grant maker. So the second point I was going to make is that we operate pretty much in a commercial way. We try to operate in a commercial way, as any business organisation does. Our governance is just slightly different, that's all really. And I guess the third thing, I'd said trying to operate in a commercial way, because again, I'm sure most of you recognise this, particularly if your businesses have grown, you set the business up to do something that you're passionate about. And in the early days, you were able to do the thing that you were passionate about. But as the business grows, you end up having to develop all sorts of skills and all sorts of ways of working that are, first of all, outside your comfort zone, way outside your expertise and experience, and sometimes are things that aren't your passion, in order that the other people that you've employed can continue to put that passion into the delivery of the service that your organisation exists for. And there's a couple of points that I want to develop out of that. So I founded Sophia 8 years ago. Myself, my wife, Ruth, who I met in my first teaching job 27 years ago. We met in our first teaching job in Leeds, and when I came back to work in Didcot, I promised her we'd be here 2 years, and then we moved back up north. It's 26 years later, so hopefully she hasn't complained much lately. So hopefully she's all right in Oxfordshire. So myself, Ruth, both ex-teachers, our colleague Kaz, who was working with us for a couple of years before we set Sophia up, who's from a therapeutic background, and I'll come back to Kaz in a moment, and Anne-Marie, who has been working with me for 15 years. Again, classic small business. I put a handwritten note in the post office window when I had my own small business, looking for a temporary part-time administrator. And 15 years later, she's now absolutely key to the operation. And we've recruited her daughter as well to work with us in one of our services. So again, there's some themes there about growth that I wanted to pick out. So when the four of us founded Sophia, we did it in order to bring the food operation to the work we were doing with the education work we were doing with young people. That's the reason the organisation existed, to bring those two sides together. And in the early days, when it was just the four of us, we knew each other well already. We have a shared values. We went through a period after a year or two of not even needing to speak to each other, because we understood exactly what each other thought and exactly where our strengths were. And it's tempting to look back on that as the kind of golden era of what we were doing, because we were just in that state of flow that happened probably a year to 2 years after we launched, where we'd worked out what we were doing. We all knew exactly how to do the bits we were doing, and we all knew and trusted each other implicitly, and were able to do that. 8 years later since the launch of Sophia, the four of us are still working together, and the four of us still have those shared values. I'll come back to that in a second. But we also have another 86 staff. We've grown really, really fast, and we've had to bring on a whole range of staff very quickly. And one of the growing pains, I think, is that way of working, when it's a small team that knows each other well, trusts each other, when you start to recruit into roles, particularly so a lot of our recruitment's internal, but when you start to do that externally, you suddenly start to find that you've missed important bits of the story, or you haven't properly inducted people properly, or you haven't properly done the recruitment to fit your values, completely. And some of the mistakes I've made around recruitment are around being desperate to get out of that groupthink mindset and think, well, we all think the same, so we need somebody who's completely different. And actually not realizing that if you do that, there's a huge amount of work you have to do for that person that you bring on to fit into the organization, and for us to change to fit with them to some extent. And we 2 or 3 times, so 2 or 3 years into the journey, when we tried that, it just didn't work, because we were looking for expertise that we didn't have. We thought we needed to recruit the opposite from us to get that expertise. And actually, over time, what's become increasingly apparent is that in recruitment, you need somebody who actually fundamentally does share the values, but has a different skill set. And that's something that one of the key things I've learned. The other thing is that I'm really, really proud of is that of those 90 staff, at least 30 are young people that have come through our own education and wellbeing programs. So they're kids that didn't finish school, got kicked out of school, have been involved in stuff they shouldn't have been involved with, have serious mental health problems. And some of the grown-ups that we employ as well have also come from similar backgrounds. And the challenge there is that we've got a very high number of people in their first job without any experience or expertise. And while that's great in that my background as a teacher means I've got a skill that enables me to develop them well, actually not having the broader expertise is sometimes an issue for them in their development, because they only know the way that we work, and an issue for us in that we're not bringing in that expertise from other sources. Having said that, they are amazing, and they're the reason that I do the job. I'm sort of rambling through a few issues, but as I was thinking about what I was going to say this morning, I think one of the things that is my touchstone, in fact, the thing that is my touchstone, is our vision statement. And as we've grown, and we'll come to some of the other difficulties that we've had as we've grown, the one thing that is the constant for me is that vision statement. And there are some really important things about it. First of all, we mean it. Secondly, it was constructed by the 4 of us that founded the organization, plus 2 or 3 others that were with us at the time. The third thing is that I refer to it with the team all the time. And the fourth thing is that when I've got a problem, that's where I go first. I'm going to share it with you if I can just get this up on the screen, just because I think it is useful. Can you see that?
Yeah, we have on the slideshow. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you read it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to read it out loud because it always sounds like a prayer when I read it out loud, and that wasn't the intention. But there's some really key things in there, and I wanted just to give you an example. So it says in there, halfway through the first paragraph, and the usual stuff. We treat members of our community with equal compassion and respect. But then the next bit for me is fundamental, and accept them as they are. As much as we completely accept people as they are, we refuse to accept any limitation on what they might achieve. that part of our vision statement is the part that I come back to resolve problems all the time. Because if you accept people as they are, then it leads you to a leadership and a management style that gives you the answers. You're not going, oh God, he's awful, we need to get rid of him. Or we're not working with her, she's terrible. We're going, no, that's who she is. That's where she is at the moment in her journey. But we're not accepting that that's the limit of her capacity. That's the limit of where she can get to. So we're going to work with her to develop her, to overcome whatever the issue is at the moment, and lead her into being a fabulous member of staff or stakeholder in any other sense. And it's really, really useful just to keep coming back to that and reminding people, particularly when they're stressed and particularly when there's an issue between people, no, look, we treat people with equal compassion and respect. We accept them as they are, but we're not accepting any limit on what they might achieve. Now, how do I unshare? Where's the button to unshare?
Bottom.
Yeah, down at the bottom, Richard.
Okay, I got it. Again, how do we then live that vision statement? Well, it then starts to come through, and this is the part that kind of, again, you probably recognize as entrepreneurs and as business founders is that the excitement of the strategy and the development of the strategy is, and the direction of travel is what we're all interested in. But that vision statement then helps us when we're growing to also work out how we grow and work out what we need to do in the organization for it to grow effectively. So that accepting people as they are, and I don't know whether you read the final paragraph there that says that we believe in the power of work, social justice and education. That then starts to inform the processes and systems that we have to put in place as a growing organization that is fundamentally about people and fundamentally about relationships. You get to a stage where you have to build those processes and systems, but because that vision statement is so clear on what we believe in and how we do it, then we're able to start to build those processes that reflect who we are as people and not just for their own sake. And I've just written down a couple of examples there. I have a disciplinary policy. It looks like everybody else's disciplinary policy. I never use it. And I never use it because I go back to my vision statement and go, actually, we accept people as they are and we help them to develop. Now, I'm not saying I would never use it. It's there because it's important and I might need it, but I don't resort to it as a first port of call because my vision statement tells me I should be doing something else.
Yeah, brilliant.
Similarly with the pay policy. So 90 staff is quite a lot. And quite a lot of those staff are on low-ish wages. But we made a commitment 2 years ago that we would pay everybody the Oxford living wage. We're not even in Oxford, but the board approved a proposal from me that we do pay everybody the Oxford living wage. What that's done lately is, again, a couple of senior members of staff with the best of intentions who are looking at our P&L and going, we're not going to hit these targets. What we could do is reduce the pay of the lowest paid people, and we'd save X £1,000s a year. So again, just going back to the vision statement, we believe in social justice. We believe in treating people with equal compassion and respect. Why are you looking at the wages of the lowest paid staff? You could save as much money by taking 10% off the highest paid group of people. And it really helps people who work in the organization. It really helps them to understand why we exist and what we exist for. Again, yesterday we had an incident. We opened a site in Milton Keynes 2 years ago, and the recruitment of the chap that runs the Milton Keynes site was absolutely critical in terms of values. We had an example yesterday where we've got a young man on one of our education programs who set a fire yesterday in the building, and clearly health and safety, safeguarding, top of the list. Have to take that with ultimate seriousness. But going back to the vision statement then gives us enables us to ask the question, how do we work with this young man safely? Not how do we get rid of this young man because he's a pain in the backside. And again, I was on the phone to Noel, who runs Milton Keynes, late last night as he was working through this, and just being able to refer back to that vision statement shortcutted a lot of that conversation. The answer might be we can't work with him safely, but at least it's an open question, not a rhetorical question. Mm-hmm. So the vision statement, really important. I've touched on some of the other issues already. Again, you'll be familiar with them. Cash, particularly when you're growing. How do you take that opportunity? How do you gear up for that growth when you haven't got any working capital? Where do you look for that working capital? How do you gear up for the growth and take the hit in the expectation that the contract will, or the contracts or the sales will grow and cover it, or do you cut your cloth accordingly? Again, so my feeling on that is that if you start to look at your P&L and your cash flow, and you're looking at and you're putting energy into expenditure cut, yes, of course, you've got to manage your costs. Of course you have. But if you're looking at your P&L and you start to put your energy into cutting the expenditure, then again, it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the energy goes into, well, how do I trim £10,000 off that budget? How do I trim £20,000 off that budget? Rather than focusing the energy on the income generation, which is, how do I make £50,000 more for that department that enables us to grow and be successful? I try hard not to be naive about these things. I know you have to keep your costs under control, but if the energy of the organisation gets sucked into, well, we can make our P&L work by making 10 people redundant. A, we go back to the vision statement and say that's not what we're about, and B, we go back to, actually, let's put as much energy into driving the income as we were going to put into cutting the expenditure and see what happens. And that, for me, is working at the moment-ish. But it's always touch and go, which kind of then brings me on to the last point I was going to make in relation to growth, which is the role of the leader. And I'm a terrible manager. I'm a really terrible manager. I interfere in the management, and I'm trying to learn to get out of it. I did some motivational maps. Has anybody done motivational map work? It's really powerful.
No, but you can come back and talk about that, because I think we're all fascinated.
So the motivational maps, I've done a lot of work on motivation over the years, but I've never seen anything that works like motivational maps. It gives you a map of your key motivators, but it also gives you a map of how satisfied you are with your key motivators. So if money is your top motivator and you're not making any money, it shows you the discrepancy, which is really cool. And I always thought that one of my main motivators was being a control freak. And this tool, actually, my control freak was quite low, but my expert was quite high. And that's really helped me understand what I'm not going in to try to control, to micromanage. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm trying to share the expertise that I do have and the mastery of some things that I do have with a team that's slightly less experienced. And that's really helped me change the way I manage rather than lead. And then the overarching thing as the leader, first of all, and again, I don't know how many of you share this, I'm really uncomfortable with that role. So I hate it when visitors are being shown around by somebody else and they go, that's Richard, he's the boss. I really don't like to lead like that, but there are some key things that I think are important. And some of the, again, you will have read or practiced a lot of these things anyway. I think there's a really strong case for vulnerability in a leader. And not the hero leader that knows the answer to it. I've just contradicted myself because my expert is quite strong, but not the person that knows the answer to everything, but is somebody that can say, without causing panic or fear in the organization, I don't know the answer to that, or I don't know what we should do. And then to use a coaching methodology to explore that with people who generally do know the answers, and to help them to understand that they know the answers and that they're better placed to affect those answers. Now that's easy to say and really difficult to do, and I'm not an expert at it at all. Again, I keep coming back to the fact that I'm a teacher, not a coach, and they're very, very, very different. But using that coaching methodology and mentality to try to lead is something that I've working hard on. And I think kind of finally on that, the power of my coach and having a coach who is amazing enables me to try to practice some of those. A, it helps me to deal with some of these more complex issues as we go on, but B, it helps me to try and implement that same approach with my team. My coach is a chap called Gareth Chick, who runs a company called CEQ, Corporate Emotional Intelligence, and he's written a couple of books which are great, and I'd recommend them. So I'm aware that I've been rambling for more than 10 minutes. I tried to focus that on issues around growing pains rather than the what we do and the specifics, but I'm really happy to take questions.
Brilliant. Thank you.